With the live action remake hitting theaters soon, I'm here to tell you all about How to Train Your Dragon. The movie. I want to make that very clear. I have no actual dragon training expertise. Do not trust me in that area. This video is brought to you by Mando. Go to shopmando.com and use promo code DAN to get 20% off site-wide, and stay tuned after the video for more info. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my review of the live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon, and no, this video did not get released at the wrong time. You know, I've been reviewing movies on the internet here for about a decade. This is the first 1 a.m. Central Time embargo lift that I can remember, but this is when we're allowed to put out our reviews, and I really wanted to talk about this one, plus I am a slave to the algorithm. So let's talk about the live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon, which opens in theaters here in the US and in many places around the world this Friday. This live-action remake is directed by Dean DeBlois, based on his own 2010 animated original, which he directed alongside Chris Sanders. That makes this the second live-action remake of an animated film by DeBlois and Sanders this summer, because they also directed the original Lilo and Stitch. If you don't know what How to Train Your Dragon is about, very briefly, it takes place on the Viking island of Berk, which is beset by frequent dragon attacks. During one of them, a young villager named Hiccup, played by Mason Thames, manages to trap a rare dragon called a Night Fury. Though he's raised to kill all dragons, Hiccup soon befriends his pet dragon instead, naming him Toothless, and decides to try to end the dragon killing after understanding that everything his village knows about dragons is wrong. Nico Parker plays Hiccup's love interest and aspiring dragon warrior Astrid. Nick Frost plays the local blacksmith Gobber, and Gerard Butler reprises his voice role in live action as Hiccup's father Stoic, who also happens to be the village's chief. Now, I'm in a similar situation with this movie as I was in with Lilo and Stitch, which is that I know that this is a very beloved film by people who are a bit younger than me, but it's not a movie that I grew up with. And after I reviewed Lilo and Stitch and gave my thoughts on it, I got so many comments from people saying, well, you would think differently if you went back and watched the original. So I decided to do a compromise on this review. I watched the new live action version before I had revisited the animated film. I think I'd only seen it once, several years ago when we were doing an honest trailer. And then after I saw the live action version and kind of put my thoughts down, I went back and rewatched the animated film again. So I'm going to kind of give you my thoughts in two different chunks. Let's start with what I think about the film on its own terms without really invoking my thoughts on the animated film. There's a reason that this movie became beloved in the first place. It's a good story with likable characters. And in bringing it to live action, the powers that be obviously decided not to fix what isn't broken. This is a scene for scene and often line for line, shot for shot remake of the 2010 movie, but I didn't remember much about that movie, so it was mostly fresh for me. And I think that this really is a fantastic family fantasy movie. Now, some would say that the legwork was already done because they brought over so much other stuff, but it's also translated very well into live action from the animated medium. The music is a carryover and it still soars, but the cinematography does as well. And when we see Hiccup and Toothless in flight, it is undeniably grand and cinematic. There's a sense of scope and scale, and there's really no feeling that any corners were cut or that anything wasn't done because bringing it to live action was just too hard. As far as the actors go, I was a big fan of Mason Thames' performance in his first movie, 2021's The Black Phone, and I think he was a great choice for Hiccup. He's not just a young actor, he's a good young actor, and he's surrounded by other actors who can bring both the comedy that you'd expect, but a little more humanity and a feeling of being grounded that I think you need in a live-action adaptation. Gerard Butler's Stoic is a great example of providing a layered version of an animated character, given that he's already done this role in multiple animated films. He doesn't just throw on some furs and recite old dialogue. We see the conflict, the worry, pride, fear, and anger in Stoic's eyes over the course of the film, and Gerard Butler takes what could have been a caricature and makes him a real character. Now, as I mentioned before, the music in this film is a given because they just carry over John Powell's existing fantastic score. But the live action work I thought was great. Dominic Watkins was the production designer on the film, and I think that it was a really unenviable task of bringing over the village of Berk into live action and doing all these designs in a way that works in a non-animated form but isn't going to step on anybody's toes. I think it was really, really good work. And it's all shot beautifully by the great cinematographer Bill Pope, whose filmography is an insane mix of generational hits and pretty looking movies that aren't very good. I think that this is one of the few movies that I would recommend paying extra for to see in IMAX because it doesn't just take advantage of the premium prices. Things like the flying sequences in particular look great in the expanded format. I saw this movie at a screening that was a mixture of critics and then people from the public that had gotten tickets to an advanced screening. And it seemed to me that the kids especially were really excited by this movie. There was a lot of just positive energy and buzz walking out of the theater. And I have to agree, I really think this is a fantastic movie for the entire family. Something that the kids are going to enjoy, something that the adults are going to enjoy, that the film fans are going to enjoy, or the people that just go to one movie a year. It really does seem like one of those things that has something for everybody. And a lot of people say that these live action remakes are lazy, but I think that everybody behind this film really did bring this story to the screen in the best possible way if you're translating to live action. Putting the animated film out of my head, which it largely was when I saw this, I don't really have any complaints. I think it's just really good filmmaking. So on my personal scale, on this first tier, I'm giving it a low grade, see it now. Again, I just don't really have any reasons to tell you not to go see it, and I think that it takes advantage of the cinematic nature of the story enough for me to justify and say it should also be seen on a big screen. Okay, so let's talk about it in context of the original movie, which I'm sure is the way that plenty of people are going to walk in viewing the film. And I get it because it is such a beloved classic for people that were kids 15 years ago and now are either bringing their kids or going as adults to see the movie. There were bits and pieces that I remembered watching the live action version from the one time that I'd seen the animated film. But when I went back and rewatched it, what I didn't really appreciate is that this is essentially an exact replica. I'm sure that people who have seen the 2010 version and have it memorized will be able to spot some small differences, but I couldn't really. Dean DeBlois was tasked with adapting the animated film, and that's exactly what he did. Nothing more and nothing less. The biggest changes are in the design of the movie. For example, the dragons in animation are cute. The live action ones really aren't. They're much more like the classic dragons that you're used to, and the boss dragon in Act 3 is an absolute behemoth. Consequently, whereas the original animated version I would say is appropriate for kids of all ages, this one I'd say maybe ages 5 and 6 to up, depending on your kid, because it is more intense and the dragon action is a little bit more harrowing than it was previously. If you love the original movie and what you want most of all is just to see that story in live action, that is exactly what you're going to get if you buy your ticket. If you love the original movie and you're skeptical about the live action remake, or you think that it is needless or pointless and you want to see something added to the story, you're not going to get what you want because this is exactly the movie that you know. I don't see anything here really changing your perception if you're already skeptical about it. I think the people that are going to benefit the most from this are the kids or the audiences that have not seen this movie before, especially on the big screen. I've spoken negatively about live action remakes in the past, but it's usually because I think they have made changes that are needless or they've delivered changes that I think make it a lesser version of the original. The Lion King, for example, delivered what I thought were inferior versions of popular sequences like I Just Can't Wait to Be King and Be Prepared, while adding an unnecessary amount of doom and gloom beyond what was already present in the movie. I don't think How to Train Your Dragon does that. Even after rewatching the animated film and recognizing that this is exactly the same thing, I don't think it's a lesser version. Mason Thames captures the spirit of Jay Baruchel's performance, but is neither imitating it nor rejecting it. The visuals look incredible, and the flying sequences are just as dynamic in live action. The character relationships also still work, I think, just as well. I think this is at worst a lateral move because there are some things that work better in animation, but there are also some things that I think work better in live action. For example, the relationship between Hiccup and Toothless in animated form, I think has a little bit more heart because it can get away with being a bit cuter, but I think that Hiccup and Stoic's relationship is better in the live action version. So is this movie necessary in that it corrects anything or drastically improves anything from the original version? I wouldn't say so, but I also don't think it does any damage to the franchise either. If anything, I think it's going to win over a whole bunch of new fans to the How to Train Your Dragon films. But that's just coming from this casual and the guy who only saw the animated film once before watching this one. I think that your opinion on the film is going to rely heavily on your pre-existing relationship or lack of relationship with How to Train Your Dragon. All I can say is that I think that it is some really solid, entertaining summer movie filmmaking. So those are my thoughts on How to Train Your Dragon. What do you think? Are you going to be heading out to see it this weekend? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I'm going to thank the sponsor for this video, Mando. I don't know if you've ever experienced summer in the South, but it's like living inside a 95-degree wet sponge for about 3 months. The instant I step outside, I start sweating. And it's not unusual for me to go through 2 or 3 shirts a day if I want to do anything else but sit inside. That's why I'm super excited that Mando has launched the Mando Deodorant Plus Sweat Control Solid Stick. I already loved Mando as a deodorant. I use it every day and I never have to worry about how I smell. But now it has clinical strength sweat control, 2 times better at controlling sweat than the standard. And it works on both sweat and odor for 72 hours. All you have to worry about is how much fun you're having outside and not how big the sweat stains on your shirt are getting. Mando Starter Pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, and free shipping. And as a special offer for fans of the show, new customers get 20% off site-wide with my exclusive code. Use code DAN at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. That's shopmando.com. Please support the show and tell them that I sent you. Mando has you covered with deodorant plus sweat control so you can say goodbye to sweat stains and say hello to long-lasting freshness. Thanks to Mando for sponsoring this review, and thank you for watching. Be sure to stay tuned right here for the latest in movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.